Hello, I'm Joshua.
Hello, I'm Katie.
Oh, you just got taller than me?
No, I think I'm the same.
Okay. I think I wanted to be taller this time.
Sure.
I'm just joking.
That's okay.
I think the camera's got a little bit tilted. Cool. So
Cool.
so this video,
This non-hierarchical
video is about the phenomenon of being ashamed of our own history.
Dun dun dun.
And I could say this a few different ways. It's like, we could also say that this video could be called sharing about things, wanting to create intimacy, but sharing about things that we are embarrassed about within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we were just talking a lot about intimacy, which you've maybe seen in our other videos, or maybe not, and that's fine, but you could go watch them. But one barrier to intimacy is often shame. So we come upon like there's kind of this like, don't go any further than this. You're gonna touch something that we can't tell anybody about. Whenever you find that in yourself, in your own energetic field, you gotta go into it, because that's the stuff that'll just eat you alive. It sucks. It's not fun. The protection you have around it is not. It's done its job. Thank you, protection, for keeping this thing safe. But just so you know, this is where all your personal power is hiding, and your life's gonna feel so much better once you just like take the lid off of the shameful secrets of the dungeon inside of yourself.
Yeah, and you can't just go around telling everybody, probably, but have someone who you really know that you can tell, or you could do this in the mirror, or you can write it out, or whatever. But A is getting yourself really transparent with, I feel this way about this topic, and it's only a feeling. It's not who I am. I am not this topic. I am not this feeling, right? Because if we don't share it, the energy, the shame just backs up, and then it becomes more unconscious, and then we do end up identifying with it, and then we jump through all these hoops to try and hide that feeling and that identity from other people, and it's just nasty. It creates illness, it creates disconnection, it creates anxiety.
And people just feel like you're hiding something. Like,
and
they don't know what you're hiding, but they're just like, I don't trust that person.
Yeah.
They're hiding something. And it's, and like Joshua said, it's not like, okay, go to the opposite. Although sometimes there's quite a pendulum swing where it's like, oh, I'm going to tell everybody about this thing I was ashamed of. And that's okay too. Like sometimes you're like, this is my thing now, is like being the person who talks about the thing. And that's okay. But like, it can also be a gradual process. It can be a journaling exercise. It can be, I like to draw cartoons about the ways that I feel about certain topics, especially when they're like big scary things, and then it's like, oh, it's just a cute cartoon now. And then maybe I share that, and I don't necessarily share the like raw feelings that come up when I'm like drawing it out, like, this is how I feel. But I could share the raw stuff too. But
and you don't have to emerge triumphant from this process. It's not about
I got it.
something being right and something being wrong. It's not about like winning, right? It's just honesty. It's very simple. It's like I don't know how to say this. It's like speaking to your fairy grandmother. It's like you don't have to impress her. It's just she can see you clearly anyway. She's your, what's it called? Fairy godmother from Cinderella.
Your fairy grandmother. We know she's a fairy.
Right. It's like if you believe in angels, or if you believe in God, or if or let's just go with fairy godmother for now.
You could call it yeah, like you're sharing it with the universe, with your higher self, with you're admitting it. It's like this self-honesty thing.
Yeah.
And the goal, if there's a goal, is freedom, because when those things are hidden, there's constriction, and it's like there's a prison inside of you that you are keeping yourself in.
Yeah.
Unknowingly, obviously. You wouldn't do that to yourself if you were like, oh, it was a loving thing at first, because you were like, oh, I'm gonna make it so no one sees this thing and everyone will like me and love me and accept me. You know, like there's this motivation of self-love, but it's distorted, because real self-love is the freedom that you allow yourself when you are just completely honest about how you feel.
You know, one of the things that really stood out for me when I discovered this is shame can only live in secrecy. And so if you start sharing something, if it stops being secret to yourself, of course, is the most important thing, but sharing it with other people, you know, even make a video like this, whatever it is, by tapping into it and letting it speak and moving the energy, it stops being a secret, and therefore it stops being shame.
It's like a shadow exposed to light is no longer a shadow. And so you can kind of see it that way. If there's shadowy parts of your psyche or your emotional body or whatever you want to, however you want to look at it, and you just shine a light of awareness onto it and this light of honesty and transparency, then it moves the energy for you. It transforms it into light.
Yeah, and actually I'll share something that's like a pattern that I've had to really become aware of in myself, is trying to expose a shadow to light by talking about the shadow as opposed to talking from the shadow, right? Because if I'm saying, you know, I have this shadow where I tend to idealize people and I tend to want them to save me in some way. It's kind of like an analytical way of looking at the shadow and saying, oh, it's there. I'm not touching it, but it's there. And I know about it, and it still seems to be impacting me, and it's still there. That's as far as I've gotten. So talking about something and analyzing it is different than going into it where you're really allowing yourself to, you could almost say, temporarily go unconscious inside of it and let that move you. Let the experience of that shadow actually wash over you completely. And as scary as that sounds, that's actually what breaks it, because we're afraid of the shadow taking us over. And that's actually what keeps it in place. If we can trust ourselves to let our consciousness pierce through it once it takes us over, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? So I'll do the one I just said, like, I do want people to save me. I want people to come, like, I don't believe in myself, and I don't believe that I'm capable of doing anything. I don't believe that I'm capable of taking care of myself, and I do want people to come save me, and I do want people to, like, sympathize with me, and I do want people to know how weak I am, and I do want people, like, this is all shadow stuff, and I'm going into it, but I'm trusting myself that it doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't actually identify, or it doesn't actually, I don't have to identify with it. It doesn't have to be a whole thing. If I take it seriously and take it literally, of course I'll be scared of it. But if it's just energy, it's just a unconscious tendency, it's just a identity that I absorbed and created over, my childhood, it doesn't mean anything at all. And letting it be there and letting it not mean anything is what actually lets it start to like the bubble pops, I like to say.
Yeah, and giving yourself a safe container for allowing the energy to move and to be expressed. So it could feel inappropriate to like let yourself go into that energy without a safe container for it, because it will be like, especially if you're around other people who don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It can be confusing because they're like, oh wow, Joshua always kind of goes into that victim mode thing, like, and has this monologue, and that he kind of goes off on, and then it's like, what? So if you kind of set the context for yourself, or it's like, you know, maybe you're doing it by yourself in the mirror, or like on a voice recorded, like you record your voice as you're talking about it. Or even writing, like you're like, okay, I'm gonna let this shadow speak for however many pages of stream of consciousness I need to write, and let it all out, and then like just allow the energy to express itself until it's nothing, until it's just like, oh yeah, I can totally see that part of myself, and then it's not, you know, remembering that this is really normal. Like everyone has those unconscious parts. Like I think the reminder that helps me to kind of come back to myself when I'm experiencing one of my shadows is like, oh, you feel so alone in the shadow, because you're like, this must be like, it's only me. And literally it's everybody. Like those are the things that unite us all more than anything else. Like it's the human condition. It's like, duh, of course you feel like ashamed of something. Like shame is so universal. It's insane. I mean, and of course, like we love to, you know, emerge triumphant and be like, I got that shame, I'm done with it. As soon as you think you're done with shame, like that's when you're the most vulnerable to attack. Like really, it's this very humbling process, right? But having humility in the process is helpful, because it is like you can't go through it without feeling like just a total piece of shit, and like you are. But we all are in that way, right? And it's like, I don't know, it's just kind of like a relief of just like, I'm human. Like this isn't a race. Like becoming more conscious is like, it's not about transcending your humanity. So if you're like trying to outrun your shame so that you never have to experience it again, you're doing it from a place where you're like just generating more things to be ashamed of. And instead of just like expanding your capacity to hold space for every single thing that wants to come up inside of you, and then it's like shame is just not a big deal anymore because your capacity for it is so great. So it's a different like way of relating to it. It's not like, oh, let me resolve it so then it's gone. It's like, oh, let me expand my heart and my capacity to hold myself, so that even though it will come up again and it's normal and it's like this, you know, just an energetic movement, I have the compassion and capacity to surround that in my loving presence.
Yeah, beautiful said. It's like exposure therapy in that way. It's like if we keep wanting to distance ourselves from these feelings of shame, disconnection, you know, guilt, whatever it is, if we keep wanting to make that go away, then we are afraid of exposing ourselves to it. And so that resistance is the issue. And if we make it a habit to expose ourselves to those emotions, they're not going to be so jarring to our field. And so then our energy field is going to be accustomed to different fluxes, and it's not going to mean as much as it meant to us previously. And so in that sense, the more mature we're getting, the more stable we're getting. The more mature, the more accepting, the more open, and in a sense, like usually we don't hear the word vulnerability in a way that feels comfortable. But when you become comfortable with vulnerability and it's normalized, then that fear of it doesn't need to be there anymore, right? Because I like the quote, vulnerability is who you really are. And so it is very vulnerable to reveal shame, but that doesn't mean it's a problem. That doesn't mean it has to be scary. That doesn't mean it has to be jarring to do so, right? We're just normalizing vulnerability, and then even our concept of vulnerability changes. Vulnerability, it doesn't have to have the same impact on us because it's a lifestyle, not a one-time thing to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So if we're embarrassed about something going on for us, if we're ashamed about our history, if we're ashamed about something that we've done or said or been accused of or been just experienced or whatever it is, we have an identity around that which has happened. And so the identity is one of being ashamed. And so by embracing the shame, we're also purging the identity, because the one who is doing the embracing of the identity is your true self. And then any identity is not your true self because you're the one who's looking at it. You can't look at something that's not you. I mean, you can't look at something that is you. An identity is like an object that you hold in yourself. So shame is like, and you're objectifying yourself when you're holding on to shame. And if you can see it like that, you can see that it's not really you. Because if it was really you, you wouldn't be able to look at it.
Yeah, and that process of holding it and loving it and looking at it as your awareness, as who you really are, looking at it from the perspective of who you really are versus the identity that's holding on to the shame. That process is really important to do inside of yourself because, we were talking about sharing something that might be embarrassing. The sharing with someone else, sometimes we can have this sort of shadow motivation of wanting the other person to hold us in that unconditional love that we really need to give to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people will be able to do that and they'll give us kind of the gateway into accessing that unconditional love in ourselves. But just holding that intention to look at it with unconditional love inside of yourself is really, really important because it can get kind of distorted when we give that power away to someone else. Mm-hmm. Or have that expectation or that. So it makes sense why it's I'm not going to share this with anybody because you want to own it first in yourself and then you can share it with everybody. It doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. There won't be a charge around sharing it anymore because you've already enveloped it in the unconditional love that you are.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a challenge to you right there. Know that you are unconditional love. Know that you can envelop it. Know that you are bigger than any feeling, any shame, any memory. Right? You have to know before you can act from a place of knowing. You have to know.
And you know.
And you know.
You know.
You know.
Yeah, you know.
You know?
You know. Your unconditional love, remember? We all need reminders sometimes.
All right, thanks for watching. I'm Joshua.
I'm Katie.
And have a great rest of your day and looking forward to the next video.
Bye.
Bye.